May I present to you the history of the camera bump. First, the flat circle. Next, the protrusion. Then, the rounded protrusion and the plateau. Then we switched to the stoplight camera. And we kept this until the stovetop. And alongside the stovetop, we introduced the domino. And since then, the stovetop has only grown. What meme will Apple develop next? That's for us to know and you to find out.
Wow.
Frankly, it's kind of bizarre that Apple has kept the stovetop camera design for this long, because typically camera bumps for Apple don't stick around very long, and they tend to mix things up a bit once they find a more manufacturing-friendly method to go with, or they add another lens, and there is talk about the iPhone 15, particularly the Ultra, getting a camera bump redesign, and I personally think their best bet, if the camera bump has to continue to grow, because the 48 megapixel sensor isn't gonna be enough to just have a optical 2x lens. We need a whole separate lens to do 3x, and now we're gonna need a different lens to do 10x or more. If Apple wants all these lenses on the back, it's gonna have to stay near the top because you've got a MagSafe ring to worry about. And I hate to admit it, it's possible that there will be more camera exclusives to the larger iPhone this year, just because you can physically fit in more lenses, more sensors when you have a physically larger phone to work with. And it's honestly kind of amazing how massive the camera bump has gotten on the regular iPhone 14 Pro. It's a relatively small, compact phone, and yet the camera is still incredibly capable for the size. So much to the point that it's starting to intrude on MagSafe accessories, and it doesn't sit perfectly flush with MagSafe Duo, and that's why they can't continue growing in both directions, in my opinion. 2023 may be the year Apple has to rethink the camera bump, and why I absolutely hope Apple just outright brutally copies the Pixel camera design, because sure, you need a little bit of space at the top because that's where the dynamic island sits, that's where your Face ID sensors are, that takes up space, so you gotta move the visor down a little bit, but once you do that, you'll have a lot more space on the back for multiple lenses, and of course, Apple could bunch all of these together into a giant module on the back that accommodates for the microphone, the flash, and all of the lenses while still retaining that somewhat iPhone-esque look, because from the beginning, Apple has stayed pretty consistent by keeping all of the cameras in the top left corner when you're holding the iPhone from the back. So they probably won't outright just copy the Pixel design like I want them to. It's one of the few things Google has gotten right in recent history. I think it's worth mentioning that there's not really any other way the camera bump can grow. So while this is just a personal preference I have, because having that visor will eliminate the wobble if you're putting your phone on a table, and yes, I know a lot of people say, just buy a case. Even the cases don't eliminate the wobble anymore because that's how thick these camera bumps are getting. So yes, it eliminates the wobble, and yes, I think it looks fine. I don't think Apple really cares that much about how the back of the camera arrangement makes them appear compared to Android phones, because as long as it's got that Apple logo on there, it's distinctly Apple. But frankly, I don't think there's any other direction the iPhone can grow without having to move around the MagSafe rings. Like, thank God Apple's no longer producing the mini iPhone anymore, because if the camera bump grew anymore, they would have to start moving the MagSafe ring down further on the iPhone, which wouldn't be a big issue for the MagSafe wallet or the battery case on the larger iPhones, but on the mini iPhone, the battery case and the wallet, they go right to the edge of that chassis. You cannot move that MagSafe ring down anymore. So to those of you asking, why can't we get a Pro mini iPhone? This is partly why. That, and the bigger the camera, the smaller the physical battery space is. So if you thought the battery life on the mini iPhones was bad, a Pro mini iPhone would have even worse battery life. But even if Apple wanted to bring back, you know, the stoplight camera design, or start kind of growing this back and forth lens design with the camera arrangement, which I saw some unbelievable reports claiming that the lenses are just going to keep growing down, they're gonna eat into that MagSafe ring. So I think the visor approach, even though it's not been leaked and no rumors are going around saying Apple wants to redesign the 2023 camera arrangement, I feel like this is like like the only direction Apple can actually go in, and I'm okay with it as long as it eliminates the wobble, because getting rid of the camera bump entirely is just so impractical. There's so many advantages to having a camera bump. As much as we'd love for Apple to eliminate it, there's a reason it's just grown year after year, and it hasn't gone anywhere. I think, unfortunately, because of the amount of space that the periscope lens requires, it may be exclusive to the Ultra, and that may be why Apple wants to name it iPhone 15 Ultra, because they no longer want you to look at it as a different version of the Pro iPhone. They may just have iPhone 15 Pro, and that's its own category, and then iPhone 15 Ultra, and that replaces the Pro Max, because they're no longer just looked at as different sizes. These are like different categories of iPhone, similar to, you know, Apple Watch Ultra, regular Apple Watch. And that's definitely a bummer, but I think if you are torn between, okay, we found hardware like a periscope lens or a larger camera sensor or something, we found better smartphone tech that can only fit in the larger size, and let's just say, for the sake of the argument, it is physically impossible to fit these lenses or fit these cameras into the smaller iPhone. Should Apple just not accommodate those cameras or not have the option of the bigger iPhone with the better camera? You could make that argument if your wish is that no matter which Pro iPhone size you get the same camera. So if you're restrictive in that way, it means that you're in favor of Apple leaving out better camera features because they simply can't fit on the smaller option. Personally, I think it's okay to restrict camera features that are only possible in the bigger iPhone, because that's better than not getting newer features at all. So it sounds like Apple most likely agrees, but all that being said, I'm very curious to see how they accommodate for these updated cameras on this year's iPhones, and if there's any leaks or rumors, no matter how believable they are, I will be talking about them and why I do or don't think they are correct. But I'd love to hear how you guys think Apple should handle the camera bumps on the back, especially now that you can get a 2x like optical zoom with one lens on the 14 Pro, even though it's not really an optical lens. That makes me wonder if, for the sake of keeping the iPhones cheap or to reduce the size of the camera bump, maybe Apple can just have two lenses on the Pro, since the Pro is no longer like the best of the best iPhone anymore. You could just have your ultra wide lens and your wide lens that both have really high megapixel counts, and for zoom, you just gotta rely on pinching in on that huge sensor, because they're kind of already doing that with the 14 Pro, and I don't think 3x telephoto really unlocks that much more perspective than 2x. Maybe then Apple will go back to having the stoplight design in the iPhone 10 and we can actually see a camera bump reduction. Please, Tim? No, that's probably not gonna happen. Don't get your hopes up, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and thank you to everyone on Tailosive Tech Pro supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So this is your Apple Sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.